All right, here we go. Welcome to Inside the 18, live from my bunker in Palm Desert, California, also known as my dad's guest room. I'm Michael Magid. With me is Instagram viral sensation. You know him as Pro GK Academy, Omar Zini. And honestly, you would think that would be the biggest deal on the show today, but it's not even close because we have a literal legend on the show today. This is absolutely incredible. We've had legends on the show, and they tell us that the legend that we're talking to now is their inspiration. So that's how legendary this person is. We have Peter Mellor on the show who, honestly, if you guys don't know who Peter Mellor is, he can send you his bio. It is about 17,000 pages. That's how impressive this human being is. Peter, honestly, thank you for joining us from Florida. This is fantastic.
Yeah, my absolute pleasure. It's a delight to be on with two great goalkeeping people.
Oh man, well that's a little concerning to me because if he likes anything that I'm doing, then maybe I'm wrong about that. No, I'm totally kidding. Honestly, Peter, one of the really cool things about before we kind of get into today's topic is the fact that people have been talking about modernization of goalkeeping, right? And they talk about the old generations, and a lot of times they talk about the older goalkeeper coaches kind of stuck in their ways and not really coming up with the times and all that stuff. And you've literally seen the entire evolution of the goalkeeping position, from the middle of the 20th century on to now, and you stay up with the game, which is absolutely, just kudos to you, because a lot of people your age they don't keep up with the game. And you're right there in the thick of it with the kids, working on the game, learning about the new ideas, new philosophies, and just honestly, I think that's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I go back obviously a long time as a goalkeeper, and when I look back, the 16 years that I played the position, never had a goalkeeping coach at any level. There was no such thing in clubs at that stage. It would just be either the head coach or the assistant coach, one day a week would tell you, hey, you're in this afternoon, the rest of the team are off, we're going to do some shooting, some crossing, whatever. But there was never any coaching of what I was doing well or not doing well. So it's come a long way. And, I like to think back here with the US Federation. I was probably one of the first goalkeeping coaches, along with Tony DiTico with the national teams, U20. I think he was the first goalkeeping coach, to work for the federation. But goalkeeping coaching is still fairly new, and that's why we've got to be careful as to how we. When I say stick together, it's a game of opinions and the whole bit. But at the end of the day, we've got to have some type of structure as to what today's game demands.
Yeah, no, I think you actually hit the nail on the head. And speaking of that, let's just get into this topic, because this is a monster of a topic. And when you brought it up, it was so funny. So just to give the audience a little bit of a backstory here, I spoke to Peter. Peter said, give me a call and we'll discuss whether about coming on the show. And I thought that was kind of like an audition to oh boy, I better be spot on or he's not going to come on the show. So he's like, call me at 9 a.m. and 9 a.m. my time, noon your time. And for people who've been living in quarantine right now, 9 a.m. is very, very early. Because there's literally no reason to get up early for people like myself who have no family or future or anything like that going on. So I call him and we talked for about an hour. And after about an hour, I was like, this should have been the podcast. This literally could have been the podcast. That's how immense the knowledge was. But one thing that you brought up in the conversation was, let's just do something simple like, I don't know, the tactical development of a youth goalkeeper. I'm like, simple. Okay. Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. So that is today's topic. We're going to talk about the tactical development of a youth goalkeeper. And Omar and I, we discussed this actually last night, that reading of the game and understanding the game, it's just so vague and nebulous the way that goalkeeper coaches ask their goalkeepers to pursue that aspect of the game, and how a lot of goalkeeper instructors instruct their goalkeeper coaches on how to do it. They say, oh, well, you should be teaching them how to read the game at 12. Well, what does that mean exactly? So Peter, let's just start with you. From people that are listening who might not be familiar with all the terminology we're using, what is tactical development?
Well, tactical development is knowing how to play the position within the team unit, whether that's the back four. Now we have the 4 and 5s sort of breaking, the 2 and 3s going high, the outside backs, and so on, and that. So tactical development is understanding from a goalkeeping point of view just what your responsibilities are in connecting to maintain possession, obviously. So tactical development at the youth level obviously doesn't happen as often as it should, based on youth organizations and, the fact that most of them only have a goalkeeping coach that works very hard all week long on technical ability, but never gets into the real tactical role with the team of how to play within that team.
Yeah, by the way, I just see Omar literally taking notes right now. He's like, you know what? I don't even need to speak. I'm just going to take notes on this because it's so true. And I think I want to ask you, Peter, and I'm sure Omar agrees with me on this. Do you feel that this is one of the reasons why goalkeepers, when they come to the collegiate level or the young professional level in the United States, are more technically proficient than tactically proficient?
Absolutely. The thing about, if we go back to technical ability, that's all. I always class it as individual. Everything that's technical, you work on yourself, whether it's your handling, whether it's your catching, whether it's your kicking. In a lot of those technical areas, there's also a tactical implementation, i.e. you may technically be very, very sound at kicking, but tactically you don't see the open player or play to the coach's game plan. It's, as far as finding those players, depending on what that plan is.
Yeah, I want to say this, that the youth goalkeeper, first off, is just in my opinion, it's a very strange animal. We had Matt Brown on from IMG speaking about working with adolescents.
Great coach, by the way. Great goalkeeping coach. Got a great future ahead of him. Yeah.
My gosh, with a endorsement from yourself like that, and I'm not exactly sure how much you Venmo'd him for that, but
yeah. He said he'd give me a pair of gloves, but I don't wear them. So,
You don't wear gloves. You don't wear gloves. You come on.
Only when it's cold. Yeah.
That never happens in Florida.
No, that's why I'm here. Yeah.
So I want to ask you, because that is a messy time, that adolescence. So a lot of people who are listening to us right now, they're not familiar with the phases of a youth goalkeeper. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking about young goalkeeper coaches, because they train their goalkeepers the same, whether they're 8 or 18, not understanding. And Nathan Thackeray, I keep going back to this from NC Courage, brought up that the demands of the game at 8 and 18 are completely different. Therefore, Absolutely. You must train the keepers for the game that they play. So can you kind of go through the different phases of a youth goalkeeper for us?
Yeah, I quite a while ago, I put together a specific document, for the federation and that, with regards to exactly this. And, basically what my belief is, and I know a lot of people like Tony Wade is great goalkeeping coach too, great background. If we look at 6 to 10s, that should be, nobody should be made to play in goal permanently. There's always an odd exception to a kid who, goes to bed with his gloves on every night because all he wants to be is a goalkeeper. So there's those type. But overall, those early ages, it should be everybody experiencing the position of goalkeeper, which usually a lot don't want to do. But it also, I think, builds character and understanding of the roles within the game, even as young as 6. And then I think that as far as that 6 to 10 age is where they should, as we say, be having fun. They should just be in those sessions, maybe coaches should have once a week in the youth organization a goalkeeping night. Make them all goalkeepers, because kids at those ages like to tumble. They like to, some or a lot of them do fall on the ground or whatever, and you introduce the ball. But now as a coach, you can start to see who has got a little bit of a way towards that goalkeeping position that's, brave, not frightened of hitting the ground and that. So it's all part and parcel of putting that as a coach into the memory bank and helping that kid as they get, towards, the 10 years of age. The reason we say 6 to 10 is because at 11, they go to 11-a-side, right? And, I think that our smallest, numbers, 11 to 14 is when, you are now seriously starting to develop in all technical aspects and some very basic tactical aspects of the game. And then obviously from 15 to 19 is when, you start to introduce all of the, not just the technical, but the detail. And technique is all about detail. It's not about, just making the save. Yeah, there's times in the game when that's great and we'll take it. But the more you work on detail technically at those younger ages, the more success they will have as they evolve through the age groups. In other words, hand positions, it's the detail, hand behind, hand on top, the ground is the third hand, but constantly looking for that in their development. And then, as I say, when we get to 15, now they've got to really start to understand the game. You hope that maybe at 14, you're introducing a little bit more of that understanding of how to play the position tactically within the team. And then, of course, as you go through those years up to 19, it becomes even more important that they do understand the tactical role, because, a goalkeeper is a shot stopper, first and foremost. But because of the change in the game, they're also the first line of attack now, once they have the ball. So there's a lot in there. And the document that I put together started very basic with the 6 to 10s. It was more like have fun, blah, blah, blah. There was probably, I think there's 5 or 6 different bullet points. But by the time you get to the 19s, it's this long, the list, of this, what they should be working on. And it's both technical and tactical and psychological, the components and physical. So
that's really fascinating that you said that, because I'm sorry to interrupt, because I mean,
no, that's okay.
What you're talking about is just absolutely amazing, and I think that's why a lot of this is going to be just you talking, because we just want to learn. I've seen a lot of development, tactical development phases that have been put together by different goalkeeping programs, and a lot of times the majority of the information is at the younger ages, and then as they start getting older, it becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. But you're saying it's actually the opposite. Is you don't want to overwhelm them young, and you want to wait until certain levels before you start introducing certain aspects.
Yeah, the way I coach it, and I call it repertoire. You're constantly repeating everything that the game is going to demand from you. And as you quite rightly said, as you get older, the game demands a lot more from you. It becomes more physical, it becomes faster, becomes more tactical in terms of organizing your defensive unit, based on what you see. And that's why the goalkeeper, tactically, when their team is attacking, in other words, maybe the goalkeeper's thrown the ball out and now their team is attacking, most goalkeepers will stay in the attacking mode. They'll watch until transition comes. When transition comes, now they try to organize their defensive unit and midfield unit accordingly. to deal with the counter. But what is very important as far as I'm concerned as a goalkeeping coach, and I think it's a very weak area in our game, is the moment a goalkeeper is the last line of defense, starts the attack, he immediately or she immediately reverts back to a defensive mode and goes, okay, where's my 2, 3, 4, 5? Based on the movement of the ball and what have you. Organizing them, even though their team has possession and is going hopefully to score a goal. Because when that transition comes, all too often, we're at 6s and 7s, and then we're trying to, make up, catch up.
Yeah. No, it's so funny. I mean, a lot of things that you're talking about right now, literally Omar and I were talking about in a text thread yesterday. I mean, late into the night. I mean, it's so funny. I mean, and Omar remembers if we were talking about late into the night. And one thing that I kind of want to go back to, and Omar, I don't know if you want to add on to this right here, but we were talking about, you were talking about the 6s and the 10s, and you were talking about the identification of the goalkeeper. Because I was talking about the rec level, and I find the rec level, that introductory level, to be extremely important, but yet a lot of people don't know how to coach it. They either keep it too fun, and by too fun I mean it's always should be fun, but as in there's no actual game aspect to it, as into the actual realism of the game, or they make it so much like they're working with 18 or 17-year-olds that the kids no longer want to pursue that passion of it. What I find difficult in that stage, and I want to ask you that question, even though I did say that I wanted Omar to continue on, is should somebody, because the thing is that you have to balance the kids that actually have an inkling to want to be goalkeepers, like you were talking about the goalkeeping, party or whatever you want to call it, with the kids that are just trying it out and are just trying to have a good time. How do you do that and still make it beneficial to that kid that wants to enter into goalkeeping?
Well, to be honest, it's an art. You have to be a very patient person or coach. You have to understand as a coach, what your priorities are, and that's to teach the position or coach the position. And what I find, and I'm going to make this quite clear over my years, is that we have too many coaches, not just goalkeeping coaches, but team coaches too, that are on too much of a fast track. In other words, there's nothing better than having a kid who really isn't that good in your program. And, we had it at IMG. They're all at different levels, but having as much patience with them as you do with your best goalkeeper, which you usually don't need too much patience with. But at the end of the day, it's down to your personality and your management, your man management of the individual. The art of coaching is, if you're in a group of goalkeepers, is that you have to treat everyone equally, but differently. And you have to come over that way to the group so that they don't feel that there's favoritism and so on. So, the point I'm making is you have to invest to learn as a coach or goalkeeping coach. Be challenged. How can I make this goalkeeper better? We had one recently at IMG, and most coaches would have given in on this kid. I refused to do that, and now he is doing so much better. He's a happier kid. He's enjoying his game, and that's what it's about. So you've got to invest and be patient.
Yeah. Omar, I want you to add on right here, because we were discussing last night in regards to our coaching development, both of us, our evolution as coaches, and one thing that you really brought up was gamification. One thing that you brought up in regards to that was how, when you start out as a goalkeeper coach, how less game realistic your trainings were compared to what they are now. And I know that you recently had Matt Doyle on for Birmingham, on that webinar. that you proctored. And can you kind of bring up a little bit of what he was discussing so that Peter might be able to add on to that conversation?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I think with Matt, it was this idea of creating more game-like stuff in sessions to invoke a certain amount of emotional and social, not construct, but just an evolution from each goalkeeper. So from the younger age groups, we want to try and see if maybe you give certain rules that allow the goalkeeper to process the information and say, oh wow, okay, he said it on the webinar of like, if this person gives me a pass and they get a point for me scoring off a one-touch finish, why don't I just take 2 touches so that they don't get any points? So again, it's just like those little triggers that you can try and help the younger goalkeepers to develop that winning mentality. And I think that is also one thing I was telling Mike, is that there have been times where I have, let's say, 4 or 5 goalkeepers in a session, and sometimes I feel like I don't like to have those lines of goalkeepers waiting at the post, and then you just turn, and it's like not robotic, but the session doesn't have much flow to it, and it's just I just get very uncomfortable as a coach seeing that. So I've always tried to get everybody to be active and have some role. And this gamification really opened my eyes to like, you can give more meaning to, let's say, it starts with the winger. Let's say one of the goalkeepers is the left back and they have to pass the ball back to the goalkeeper. How about we give them an incentive that if they pass it to him and they sprint and they can actually force a bad pass, or they can force a deflection or something, they can get a point from that. So now you actually have the goalkeeper wanting to win the ball, and now you actually have the goalkeeper who's receiving the ball and trying to play out, playing with real pressure. So to me, it was just like, to me mentally, I was like, wow, you can actually get a lot more out of these sessions by adding more incentives for the goalkeepers to feel like they can put more game-like pressure. So that's kind of what I drew from the whole Matt Doyle, webinar gamification. But for me, that's been personally my biggest, I'd say, in terms of session design and session structure, of being able to do 2 things at once, which means work on the goalkeeper in the goal, but also work on the social and emotional mentalities of the goalkeepers that are outside of the goal as well. So I think that's been the biggest thing that I've learned so far from this whole quarantine process.
Yeah. I think something that I believe in too is when you've got a group of goalkeepers in your practice, and they can be somewhat at varied levels of ability, is in that session, obviously you're going to go to 2 goals most of the time, but the players that are not going to be in the goal, i.e. there'll only be 2, you now put them in positions in the field tactically that they would face in a game type situation, but now you say to them, look, okay, you're going to play the number 3 position here. You're going to play number 2. And it's a small-sided game, depending how many you've got. And you talk about, the 4 and 5, and then maybe you have a 10 and that. However you work it out. But the point being is that you want those goalkeepers that are now playing in the field to experience and see what the role of those players are. Because as a goalkeeper, we don't really always know, what the left back's responsibilities are, certainly at the younger ages. So by doing that, and then rotating through the goal, every goal, you change the goalkeeper and they go into a specific position. What you're doing is you're, letting the game be the teacher, but you're letting the goalkeepers understand what the role is of the 2, of the 3. And you can obviously coach in the flow with that as it goes. And we have had great success in that. And it's really helped for the understanding of, if I'm the goalkeeper and I'm throwing the ball out to the 3, where do they want the ball? Okay. Well, at the feet, into space, depending, whatever. So you get chance of really coaching. But if the 3, who is a goalkeeper, but is playing the 3 position, doesn't open up, now you're asking, hey, why aren't you opening up? What should you have done the moment, the goalkeeper received the ball? Because that's what you want your number 3 to do when you're playing on Saturday, based on different scenarios. So, I think it's a great opportunity to tactically start to teach our goalkeepers, what the role of those positions are by physically doing it.
I love what you're saying right there in regards to just that actual tangible learning of actually experiencing it, because I think one of the issues, and we had Daryl Shore on from Forward Madison, head coach, who obviously started out as a goalkeeper coach and then moved up to become, and I don't like to say moved up, because some of us enjoy being goalkeeper coaches, and there's nothing wrong with that. Because I personally I've tried being a team coach. I don't like it. It's stressful. Parents care too much. Like I would much rather just focus on the development aspect. But he's talking about, understanding the game. And one of the biggest issues that we have as goalkeepers, we try to teach them the game, X's and O's on a whiteboard, as opposed to letting them actually experience the game. And I'll be honest with you, if you put me at the 6, I'm lost. I'm 360 degrees. What are you talking about? No, I just, everything just this way. I don't want anything behind me at all. I don't have to look behind my shoulder. So I think that's really good what you're saying, because then those goalkeepers are going to be able to empathize with these players. Because I think that's an issue. I think it's an issue. We as goalkeepers, we're yelling at people, and we've never been in that position.
Right. What we find in youth soccer is, because of the way it's goalkeeping technical training works, in the week and this, that, and the other, is that there's a definite disconnect between the youth defensive unit and the goalkeeper. It's an us and them, because either the back line are always blaming the goalkeeper. If the goalkeeper demands something from one of those defenders, they all get upset, So there's a lot of disconnect between the goalkeeper and the defensive unit at the youth, because, they're all sort of proud, especially on the boys' side. The girls are a lot better with it, but the boys in particular, oh, shut up, you, what do you know, blah, blah, blah. And we never make that any better because we don't tactically have a goalkeeping coach going into their practice in the week with their head coach and standing, looking from in the goal out and helping the goalkeeper within the flow, and sometimes making the odd stoppages with the head coaches okay, to coach position and have the goalkeeper talk to the back four. In other words, let's say there's a situation where the back four weren't organized, there was too much space between, so the supporting angles or something, is stop it. This is a little bit older, obviously, 15, 16, stop it. And instead of going in and fixing it, go to the goalkeeper and go, okay, why have I stopped this? If they don't know, then we help them. But if they do, say, well, the defender, there's too much space. Okay, fix it. John, you need to move over 2 yards. Fred, you need to drop back and cover, so we got the pressure, cover, balance, whatever situation. Okay, great. Defenders, did you hear that? Yeah. Okay. He can see it. You're not doing it. So let's be a team and not get upset because he's saying, hey, you got to get tighter, or you got to do this. We're in this together. Nobody sees the game better than the goalkeeper from in to out, rather than the coach seeing it from out to into you, the goalkeeper. They don't know what you're doing half the time.
I love what you just said right there, because that's something that's an issue in my opinion. And I've had issues in regards to working with different DOCs and different team coaches in the past, where I don't know my place. And Daryl Shore and I, we obviously talked about that, that you need to have that communication with your team coach, obviously being a goalkeeper coach of your stature to be able to stop that conversation. But I love what the fact is that you didn't ask the goalkeeper coach, tell them what's going on. You wanted them to think and problem solve on their own. And Tim Dittmer, head of goalkeeping for the FA, he brought that up. He said, if you want a thinking goalkeeper, then you need to teach them how to think on their own. And I think, especially in this country, there's too much micromanagement of our goalkeepers.
Absolutely.
And how you're not going to be able to teach tactics that way, right?
No. And that relates to what, I was saying earlier about when you've got a group of goalkeepers and you play a small-sided game, getting them to understand all of those positions so that they feel comfortable on a Saturday telling the number 3, hey, you've got to get tighter, or you've got to do this, you've got to do that, and it's all about developing a better chemistry between the defensive unit and the goalkeeper, because most teams, there's a definite us and them, separation. And, we've worked hard at that at IMG to try and, get everybody to buy into it. And it's paying dividends, So, at the end of the day, it's all about perseverance and, how you teach it.
Yeah. Omar, now that you're back, I kind of want to ask you, because, you've been coaching at the collegiate level the last couple years, and that's been a great experience for you. Peter, just to give you a heads up, Omar had the National Goalkeeper of the Year, National Player of the Year, Division II?
Yeah.
National Player of the Year, Division
Congrats.
II.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Appreciate it.
But working with those later phases, when we're talking about the older goalkeepers, because I still consider collegiate goalkeepers still the youth level, in my opinion. I don't know, Peter, how you feel about that. Do you consider that the adult, or do you still consider that youth development?
No, I think looking at our American goalkeepers, I think you're spot on. They still have so much. If they're going to go to that next level, so much to learn. More the nuances and the little things that you're expected to do at that next level. College goalkeeping, we've had some great goalkeepers come through, but we also see they've been number 1 in college and the whole bit. They get drafted and they go nowhere. They fall off the planet. And I think that, shows a lot. We've had some great ones come through. I can look back at Nicky Ramondo when he first came into the U17 program. Never did ODP, because it was only ODP back in those days. We're just playing. We scouted him, brought him in, and the rest is history, of course. And everybody was on then about, oh, he's too small, he's this and that. I said, I'll tell you what, back all those years ago, he actually played, and Timmy Howard was the number 1 goalkeeper with the 17s at the time, and Nicky was 2. And we had so many injuries that we needed a field player. So we put Nicky into the field against Mexico. He was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. The reason being is his feet. He was ahead of the time back then. We know where it is about possession with the feet and distribution selections and the whole bit. But he was unbelievable, and of course you've seen that even with Real Salt Lake. So there's so many differences in goalkeepers, but you have to pick out what they're good at and make it even better, as well as working on their weaknesses. That's the main thing. Yeah.
Omar, what are some of the issues that you've had in regards to teaching tactics at that collegiate level? Because a lot of those guys are kind of stuck in their ways. They're already 18, 19, 20. And like Peter was saying, it's still the end of the youth development phase.
I think just the time. I think in terms of I think last year we had 4 games in 9 days or something like that. So there's it's just a press for time. So there's not really much of a tactical development. I mean, we have that when we watch film and things like that, but it's more of we play a game, you go do rehab, and then we don't have training the next day because it's we have days off and then we have the next game. So the goalkeeper is learning a lot about the tactical development because they're playing so many games, but also too, from a coach's perspective, it's very difficult for me to criticize them because we obviously need them to be confident and, confident in their own abilities come the next game, which will be on Monday, then a Thursday. So for me, it's been difficult because I even have the conversation with the head coach and he'll say, no, I know the goalkeeper made a mistake here, here, and here, but be careful what you say because we know from the psychological perspective, we don't know how he's going to take it and we don't want him to play poorly the next game. So it's difficult in terms of the tactical development because of the restriction of time. But I think if we go into like the spring and we have more, time in between games and we have more flexibility to kind of speak our mind to the goalkeepers without having to worry about them losing confidence or without having to worry about them not being ready for the next game, then I think we're better off in the spring. But in season, it's very difficult for me to really make too many tactical adjustments.
Peter, I have a question for you. Michael Doherty yesterday from Northern Ireland Goalkeeping Institute, and I love a lot of those videos that he puts up. He showcased one where he was showing how the movement of the goalkeeper throughout the game determines the tactics of how the other team plays against their back line. And I think this is something that's really an issue with a lot of younger goalkeepers, is understanding their connection with their back line and how their movement is important too. You see it so much at the younger phases, and I'm even talking about the second phase of the adolescent, where they wait until there's a breakdown like you were talking about, and then they're starting position, or they make a save and they kind of just walk around, and then all of a sudden, like, now their team passes the ball back to them and now they have to try to get back in position. So how do you work with a goalkeeper to understand how they have to move within the game?
Well, an exercise that I use, and it's, maybe a little old fashioned in that, but, certainly for the younger goalkeepers and even, the 15, 16, 17 is the rope. It's not just the angle one off the post, but I take a long rope, and I anchor it on the goal line and take it right out. It's a real long rope to the other other half, wide on the wing. So
that's the longest rope I've ever seen. That's impressive.
Oh yeah. And I call it staying in line with the play. So what most goalkeepers don't do is they don't take or make small adjustments often. They tend to make big adjustments occasionally, which costs them being out of position. So the point I'm making about the rope is, if you can visualize from the center of the goal right out to just over the halfway line, right on the touch line, say, so we've got an angle to the goal with that rope. The goalkeeper then has to be straddling that line, obviously up around the top of the 18 because of the distances and that. Okay, and then what we do with that is we get the opposition to play balls across either back and forward from left to right, and I'll say stop, and we'll take the line and we'll see if the goalkeeper is in line with that next position that the ball's at, and you would be shocked how much they can be out from 1, 2, 3 yards from that distance of good starting positions. So it's a visual that really helps them understand the concept of staying in line. And then, of course, as the play comes closer, you have to retreat. And then at the older levels, you've got things, if now, I talk about beware of the 35-yard line. Most players, we won't say never. Pele, I think, scored one from the halfway line once, but from 35 yards and out, if I'm in goals this side of the 35, most players, and certainly at the younger ages, are not looking to shoot, right? They don't have the ability or whatever. They don't have the savvy yet, right? The younger ones. So goalkeeper positioning, based at being in line, obviously depends on now staying connected with the back four by holding them up, okay? And a lot of the time, if the goalkeeper is too much of a line keeper, that will affect the back line to drop, right? Giving the opposition more territory space to play into. So 35 yards and out, usually not looking to shoot. Don't take it for granted, but very, very rare, right? Now we come to 35 and in. Now we have to really start, because we're, you know, depending on ages, again, we're in shooting distances, and we're looking at the older levels where the keeper is. So this ebbing and flowing, I call it north, south, east, and west, you know, staying in line, ebb and flow with the game becomes so much more important. But from 35 yards and in, this is where tactics come in for the goalkeeper. You now have to recognize pressure on and off the ball. In other words, you know, if the attacker's got a defender closing them down, you know they can't shoot, because, you know, there's pressure on the ball. So you can step up that little bit as a goalkeeper based on what the game is telling you, right? If that ball gets played then even square to a non-pressured player, now the goalkeeper has to obviously move across to be in line again, but can't get caught too high. So it's more of a diagonal drop into position to cover the space between them and the shooter, and them and the goal. So there's a lot of little adjustments, and that's what I'm saying is goalkeepers have to make little adjustments often. The best goalkeeper for me of all time at doing that, because he wasn't an athlete, and I had the pleasure of working with him a bunch of times, and great friend, is Casey
David
Keller.
Seaman? Oh, no, I got it wrong.
Yeah. David Seaman, yeah. It was Casey. Casey, his positioning was unbelievable. It really was. And he made some great saves too. But I'll give you an example. I was fortunate to be in, what was it? The Gold Cup in 90-something, 90 whatever. When we scored, Preki scored a goal against Brazil, right? We won that game, if you remember, 1-0. And Casey was unbelievable.
I just literally, it's one of the biggest goalkeeping memories of my life. I mean, honestly,
Really?
I can still remember where I was when I was watching that game. I remember Romario shook his hand after that game.
That's correct. When he made the save right on the line. Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. But this is the kicker to this was, so I was in with the full team, and Steve Sampson, that night, everybody was jubilant, right? And this was the day of, we didn't have all this technology. All we had was VCRs, and, you know, we were able to, you know, take the game footage and stop it and start it. So Steve Sampson says, Peter, I want a meeting with the players, with the team in the morning, but I want you to, you know, put something together. So I said, okay, coach, no problem. Yeah. Well, I spent all night, because I didn't know what the heck I was doing with all these plumbing, sticking tapes in and that. Then I lost what I'd already put together, and so on. I never slept, right? But I ended up making a video, and it predominantly was Casey. And I called it, and I still have that video, even though, actually, I've got it on a DVD now, because I used to use it in coaching education, and it was entitled Casey Keller versus Brazil, right? But here's the kicker. So the day after, you know, we have the meeting, present it, obviously, the guys are all elated because of what a great win, blah, 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 blah. We showed the video. Everybody, you know, loves Casey and the whole bit. So I get home, and I get a call from a coach, and I see great win. You know, yeah. He said, Casey was unbelievable. He went, what? Everything was straight at him. And I went, oh, really? Really? But that was a non-goalkeeping coach, right? So unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, Peter, I want to say something about that too. I think it's something that I've maybe, I don't know, I'm just kind of like drawing from my own experiences and from my own training sessions sometimes, where I feel like maybe it's through social media and sometimes the things that I see that coaches, certain coaches put up, and, we only see the final action, like the saves, the big saves and things like that. So sometimes that kind of triggers my mind as to like, okay, when I do my sessions, that final action needs to be what we're working on,
Right.
versus like you're saying, painting the big picture, which again, now that you're saying, drawing that line, I've never done something like that, but I've had, opportunities where my goalkeeper coach or myself would stand behind the goal, and then I say, hey, you guys watch me step in, or my coach would say, watch me step in. Let me show you how to track the ball and how, what your
Right.
body's. So to your point, though, I think it's a good teaching point for goalkeepers and goalkeeper coaches, for coaches to create more session plans that it's not about the reps anymore, but it's more so about the flow of the game. So maybe you get,
Correct.
30 or 40 yards, and you're talking about when you're breaking that seal of 35 yards and in, then you start, maybe as a coach, you watch the goalkeeper and you say, hey, this is what you look like through the film. Maybe once they break that barrier, this is what it should look like. And
Right.
vice versa too, where it's like you may not even get a shot on goal at the end of that whole rep, because we're goalkeepers, we're playing a 2 to 3, that whatever. It's difficult for us to get a shot on
Yeah.
goal sometimes because we're not there. But I think it sparked something in my head now where I was like, I think maybe I should change my approach to this whole thing of getting into sessions where it's reps, because I don't want people to wait, to more of like, hey, look, we'll do a little bit of the reps at the beginning, but towards the middle and the end of the session, let's give you some more game stuff. And it's the conversation Mike and I had yesterday about like,
Yeah.
it's not about
It
every
was like a
session being
4-hour conversation over text too. It was,
Yeah.
But no,
Yeah.
and I told him,
I'm gonna have to put this in because it said low power. So
Okay.
can I just go audio?
yeah.
As
While,
long as I've
yeah,
got power, right? Hold on.
yeah, yeah,
Okay. Let me just plug in.
sure.
Sorry about this. But
No worries.
it's all good.
No worries, man. We want you to be plugged in. That's not an issue in any way whatsoever.
Just you and I now.
Yeah, it's just us right now while he's doing that. Well, Omar, let's continue on that conversation though, because we had that conversation last night, and I want a lot of goalkeeper coaches out there to hear this, because especially when I was growing up and when I was racing, I think you're the exact same thing. It was all about how many reps can you get into your session? How many reps can you get into your session? And Tim O'Queen actually brought this up to me probably 12 years ago or so. He said, in typical Tim O'Queen way, he's like, hey, pal. He's like, after that 8th rep, he's like, there's no way he's keeping it clean. He's like, he's too tired. He's too tired, pal. So why don't you do 4? Why don't you do 4 good ones, and you'll have a better session? And it made me think. I was like, oh, what am I? Am I a fitness coach or am I a goalkeeper coach? And we talked about it last night. And in regards to the fact that I like to use, myself personally, I like to use service as activation into the game movement a lot of times. This is obviously in the later on phases of the session. You are going to have your movement preparation at the beginning, where you're just going to have some clean handling and footwork and all that sort of thing. And sometimes you will just do a session where it's just that. But when you are doing any sort of trying to break down something that just happened that past weekend, or a certain trait that you're seeing of this goalkeeper making a mistake over and over again, I want to use the service for basically, Blodge says good mulch impersonation. I want to use that. I want to use that service to activate them, to make them think I'm in the game. And that's why a lot of times when they just throw the ball back, I'm like, dude, that's not what you do in a game. So let's think from a game standpoint. We have the ball, they have the ball. Why don't you elaborate on that a little?
No, even like you said it right now, like it's not game realistic. I've even thought about doing where when you get a volley from me, instead of like catching it and throwing it back like this, do a chest pass, just so that we can always reactivate it back in this spot, and you're going here. So it's forcing you to do an extra movement, causing you to have to see it all the way through, pause for a second, and then release. Like we talked about the crossing situation sometimes. When you catch a cross, you got to see it all the way in, hold for 1 second, and then move on to the next movement. So it's finishing one progression, going to the next one. But I think that's been like my biggest thing, though, and you know this for me, is that I'm a very impatient person, and I've really, like, even thinking about it gives me like my heart's like pumping, because I'm just thinking, like, would I have the stomach to change it if things go bad? So sometimes when things in sessions aren't going pretty because of you're trying new game realistic stuff, and you're having more accountability on the other goalkeepers in the group to make sure that this rep is significant for the one in the goal. Sometimes I've had situations where I get those kids and they just either they get nervous, I don't know what it is, but they can't complete that pass and turn it into a good rep. And I get a little bit self-conscious about it. And I go, man, this is a bad session because that kid couldn't get that pass going. That's why the goalkeeper in the goal is not going to benefit as much.
But it's your job. It's your job, Omar. It's your job to find a way to use that variable of that bad service to the advantage of the goalkeeper that's in the goal. So how do you adjust that session? Because you know this kid's giving bad service consistently. So what do I like? Let me ask you a question right now. Like, what do you do in that situation?
No, I would probably move some pieces around, but the big difference that I would say is that up front, I would probably be, because my sessions have always been like go from one to the next to the next to the next. Probably the last like 20 minutes of the session, a little bit more unannounced services and a little bit things. I budget more time for that to go haywire. Like, okay, this is probably going to be situations where a cut back the forward or one of our goalkeepers is not going to put it on frame. So be it. But at least you got a lot of quality in the session, so that the quantity may go down towards those last 20 or 30 minutes. So that's how I've always budgeted my stuff. So what I would change, back to your question, is probably up front say, guys, look, I'm changing the style up a little bit more unannounced stuff. I'm going to put more onus on you guys, a little bit more ownership on you guys to take that touch and put it on frame. And even if they don't put it on frame, the goalkeeper that's in the goal, I'm going to watch your movement. And if you're not in line and you know what I'm saying? Like, we could still learn a lot from situations when the play doesn't, I told you before with Saskia, a ball comes in and, you completely mistime it. Nothing happens from it in a game. But in your head, you go, okay, no harm, no foul. But that ball just came in. I hesitated. Then I went and then I recovered to my line. Nothing happened, but maybe next time I could do this. So even though you didn't have to make a save, they didn't score, you still learned something. So I think that is a conversation you and I had yesterday of like, it's not about the quality sometimes. It's about what can the goalkeeper step out and learn from the session. So I think what I would change is just making sure that up front I have that conversation like, look, guys, things may not be perfect, but so be it. It's not in a game. Let's see how you react to those imperfections.
Yeah. One thing, by the way, is I love the fact that we're trying to do our best to seem like the big experts that everybody tuned in to see while Peter was charging his phone. But I want to bring that up because in that conversation we were talking about the messiness of the game. And I think that's really relevant to this conversation we've been having about tactical development, because the game itself, as Peter, you back on? Oh, almost. He's almost back on. Because the game itself is messy. And I think a lot of times we're trying to paint a picture that's not realistic to the game, because it's never going to be perfect in the game. It's just never going to be like that. So, I think I want to encourage all the goalkeeper coaches out there to not worry so much about creating the perfect session, and sometimes letting the disaster happen and letting your goalkeepers deal with that disaster and improving from that disaster.
Well, Jack Stern at FC Cincinnati, when I had him on the podcast, he mentioned that he has those conversations sometimes up front before the session starts. Like, look, guys, I've never run this session before. Bear with me. Let's see how this goes. So I think, again, that collaborative effort and that conversation that if you have with your goalkeepers, that trust that's already embedded, you say, look, Mike, this is a session I haven't done yet. And it's going to take a lot of responsibility of you guys to put these shots on frame. Just whatever you do, put them on frame, 2-touch, 3-touch, whatever it is, put them on frame, and we're all going to benefit. As long as you have that conversation so that at least everybody's on the same page, versus it going crazy in the session and then people go, oh my God, what are we going to do here? And then now it's more of a panic state versus like, we expected this.
Yeah. Peter's back on. Yeah, he's back. He's back.
Yeah, I don't know how long I've got, but we'll see.
No, hey, no worries. And by the way, if you need to charge the phone, you can always just take out the earphones and just start charging the phone and just speak through the speaker. We'd rather have you than not be able to have you. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think people will deal with audio imperfections. We've just been talking about the messiness of the game. So this is it right now. Like, we didn't plan for it to happen like this, but yet we have to deal with the situation. So Omar and I, we were talking about this, and we talked about this last night. We were talking about the messiness of the game. And because the game is not perfect, why are we trying to put together sessions that don't paint the picture of the game, which is there's going to be variables you can't predict. There's going to be bad service. There's going to be a ball looped over your head that you weren't expecting. There's going to be, a ball that hits your fingertips just the wrong way and takes a bad bounce, and now you got to go for that second ball. So why don't we incorporate that in when we're talking about teaching tactics? Like, why don't we incorporate that more into our sessions, Peter?
Yeah, I mean, you've always got to look for the intangible things that can happen in the game, and a big part of what we always did with the national teams was, we would have the goalkeepers and work a lot on, reflex type saves and things where suddenly, the last second the ball, as you say, takes a deflection off the side leg of a defender or something and thought it was going wide, and suddenly it's coming goalwards and you've got to go down quickly. I did a shoulder like that against Manchester United, and I'd have a rotator cuff done.
Name drop.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I think I had a similar situation happen to me in a men's 7-a-side game recently. So about the same
well,
level,
same
right?
thing. Yeah. But at the end of the day, I just think you've got to have sessions where all of these strange things that can happen, you've got to account for. Even a goalkeeper getting injured and there is no backup, say, and can't kick the ball for whatever reason, is okay. In our training, can we get them to use their weak foot? That's a biggie with me, is how many goalkeepers can't use their weak foot, or in throwing, they don't technically have all of the different technical ability, to throw, whether it's a rollout, a side throw, I call it, the javelin, overarm and that, so we've got to do a lot more in rounding out the goalkeeper's arsenal, to help them in situations where, they may get called on. So yeah, you've got to work on, those type of areas, deflections and so on, and we've all done it, with the old step-up benches that we had at school, right? Out on about 8 yards out, and somebody hitting balls against them, and you're in goal a yard off your line, and now suddenly, boom, you've got to go down quick, or it comes up and you've got to push it over the bar. So yeah, it's a part of goalkeeping development that a lot of the time gets neglected.
Yeah. I want to talk about this because we've been talking about youth development, tactical development, and when we had Matt Brown on, we were talking about adolescence. And like I said, adolescence is a very difficult time because a lot of goalkeepers were very good at a youngers, and then they get to adolescence, and all of a sudden their body's changing, and so things are changing. So they start struggling mentally and physically because their attributes are different. So how do you help a goalkeeper adjust their tactics based on their fluctuating attributes during this time?
Most of that, in terms of their psychological development, you're going to do that off the field. You're not going to do it on. You're going to I just got my low power mode again. Sorry.
That's okay. You can just plug it in and just go to just a speaker if you want. So.
Okay. Let me just do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mike. I think that's the. I don't know. I'm not trying to read Peter's mind, but I would say it is like very individualistic. Like everybody, will figure out different strengths that they have, and I think us as coaches, it's important to work with those goalkeepers and say, look, you may be a little bit lankier, a little bit taller, so maybe let's work on that wide stance on closer range shots. So you have the ability to get lower, or you have a quick twitch fiber. You can step off your line a little bit more because you're probably a lot faster for those through balls that come in. And you can play sweeper keeper. So I think it's just about understanding and having the goalkeepers again have that social aspect of understanding what their attributes are, and then giving them the platform to say, look, tell me what you think your attributes are, and let's try and fine tune them. And things that aren't very good, let's try and fine tune those as well. So we can actually have a directed session versus just like we're trying to guess.
Yeah, Omar, can you say that again, but with more of a refined cadence and an English accent? That'd be great. Then it would work out. Peter, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think overall, you've obviously got to address it in the actual training of the goalkeeper. That those sort of peaks and valleys, as I call them, of their confidence and so on. It's all part of their adolescence and that. But the one thing that I always instill in all of our goalkeepers, and they're all different, as I said earlier, you've just got to be seen, be the same, treating them all equally. But I want them all
to understand that I'm not just their goalkeeping coach, I'm their best friend, because I understand from a goalkeeping perspective and also a growing perspective what you're going through. And you know, a lot of the time, the kids just need encouragement and help. And again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier, patience. And you win them over. It's a process. And, you know, to be honest, it's part of being a good coach. If you're going to give up on them or go, never going to make a goalkeeper. Well, everybody can play the position. We don't know how well, but that's the attitude you've got to have. And, you know, at the end of the day, I think it's all about how you psychologically, because I'm big on that component. You know, with IMG, we used to have, or they do have, the mental conditioning coach will communicate with me, go, what you're going to be working on, you know, what areas. And then that coach would come out and watch the session based on the conversation that the day before in our planning, and then would talk to the players, whether it would be individual or collectively, about certain psychological aspects that were goalkeeping, you know, how to deal with this. You know, so I think a lot of it is more giving them confidence to work through those areas. And especially if you've seen good things, and you know, that's the hard part, is you want them to get better all the time, you know, because you see initial improvement and then suddenly it tapers off or goes downhill. But that's the art of coaching. You don't give in, you know, and these kids need you. And you know, I coach using the holistic values of life, but using the game of soccer to be the vehicle to coach. That's how I see it, and that's what I believe in. And the game's been great to me. But at the end of the day, every kid deserves your time and attention, whether they're rowdy, whether they're quiet, whether they're a problem. Well, see how good a coach you are. Sort the problem out.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest mistakes I made when I was a younger coach, was really the kids that are the problem were the most challenging for me. And then a lot of times, one of the issues a lot of times, I think, when you're a young goalkeeper coach, is that generally just somebody who was a goalkeeper gets thrown into the position as goalkeeper coach with very little training in it, whether they take over as a first year goalkeeper coach at a college after they just finished playing at a college or whatever. But we're not really taught how to be coaches first and then goalkeeper coaches second. How do you feel about that?
I'm very big on, you know, anybody who is a goalkeeping coach, and there will be the odd exception, but I think that anybody who looks at themselves as a goalkeeping coach should consider themselves as an assistant coach / goalkeeping coach, because that's where the tactical role comes in. Whether you can have the ability to coach it within your environment and club or whatever, it doesn't matter. And let me give you an example of why I feel pretty strong about this. Is everybody's a student of the game, hopefully, right? But let's take the national goalkeeping license, which you took and were successful in. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. You were instrumental in that, so thank you very much. And I appreciate all the service that you did for U.S. Soccer during that time period to benefit us goalkeeper coaches and the team coaches that were at that program, because it was extremely, you know, and I know it was unfortunate the direction that it went, but it made me a better goalkeeper coach. So thank you.
Oh, absolutely, and that's what it was all about. But here's the little kicker in terms of experiencing, you know, those, I think it was 8 years that we ran the course and the whole bit with Phil Wedden. And the interesting part was, you know, it wasn't just for goalkeeping coaches, as you know. We encouraged the team coach to come in and that. But it was surprising how many so-called goalkeeping coaches, that's what they did in club or even collegiately, failed because they couldn't tactically coach the unit. They didn't know how to go in, stop it, organize the defensive unit in the correct mode, through the goalkeeper. And to me, that was alarming. And that's why we came up with, are you a goalkeeping trainer or are you a goalkeeping coach? A goalkeeping coach should be an assistant coach because they know the game. They're going to see it from in to out instead of out to in, even though we want to do both ways if we can. But at the end of the day, it's all about, you as a goalkeeping coach being able to coach a team.
Omar, I want to ask you this because you were just recently in the college game. Both of us have not been in the college game recently. Set pieces. Your team was very big on set pieces and organizing set pieces. Were you instrumental as a goalkeeper coach in that phase of the sessions?
Sorry, my grandma's making something, so if you can hear the blender.
Okay. Do you need me to say that again?
No, I can hear you. I just didn't want to.
Okay.
Can you hear it?
Yeah. No, I can't hear it.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, we had there were times where the coach would say, this is what their tendencies are, the opponent's tendencies are. Let's maybe say for our goalkeeper, maybe encourage a little bit of a higher starting position here because they try to leave that whole window open, or make sure you tell the goalkeeper to tell the center back to either drop off into that space or step up a little bit higher. So it was just those little minor adjustments, and then from the wall, he was the one who had to decide if it was a 2, 3, 4, or 5-man wall. Depending on his, I guess, what he wanted to do. But for the most part, yes, we would watch the film as a team, as a coaching group, and decide where we would probably have the most optimal set position for our back four and our goalkeeper. And then we would have those conversations with the back four and the goalkeeper and say, look, from the film, Alex was our goalkeeper at the time. This is what we see from their, from their service. And then the back four, this is what we see from their service. Where do you guys feel comfortable? Do you feel comfortable dropping in deeper? Alex, do you like when the the team's on top of you, or do you want to leave that space open because you want to be more aggressive? So that was the open conversation that we had, and the second goalkeeper, third goalkeeper would listen in as well. And then if we needed to make any adjustments based off of that, then we'd make those adjustments. But I think it was just super important that, and we talked about earlier, Mike, just having that foundation of agreement between the center backs and the goalkeeper, so that when the moment does happen, there's no bickering, there's no we're trying to problem solve on the fly. It's more of okay, we've rehearsed this. What are we going to do? Perfect. Boom, boom. Now they're focused on their man marking, and my goalkeeper's focused on the service. That's it.
Peter, I want to ask you, with youth, I find set pieces to be the most difficult thing to teach from a tactical standpoint. I think reading the game in regards to through balls is much easier for them to do. The two things I think are the most difficult, in my opinion personally, are teaching set pieces and flighted balls. Flighted balls are just a killer at the youth level. Understanding the flight of the ball and the direction and where to start and all that sort of thing. Do you agree that those two are probably the two most difficult?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, set plays. Again, depending on ages, but I'm talking about from 15 up, right? Obviously, the way into college. I'm a great believer that you make the goalkeeper very instrumental with the head coach in what they want, because obviously there's a learning phase of understanding free kicks, different types of circumstances, situations, direct, indirect, and all of that. But at the end of the day, I think we sometimes neglect the comfort zone of the goalkeeper in those positions. And as a goalkeeping coach, I would always, if the head coach, and I've worked with a lot of different head coaches, if they were adamant about something, you would be surprised how often a goalkeeper would come up, and I'm talking at national team level too, and say, I don't like that type of setup. And I'll give you an example, and somebody I owe a lot to, Coach Bruce Arena. I went in with the national team, and we were playing Mexico. So the night before, in Azteca Stadium, the night before, the two goalkeepers we had they were okay. Casey Keller and Brad Friedel. And that's a whole nother story about their relationship, which was very professional. But anyway, so we have a team meeting the night before the game. And, Coach Arena goes through all the bits, the usual stuff, and gets to set plays. So he goes, this is the way we're going to have the wall, blah, blah, and I'd never really worked on what I'm going to tell you. Was, he says, and I want a jumping wall, right? And when you jump, guys, because he had the names, he said, I want you to point your toes down to make a bigger barrier. Well, I was sat near the back. I looked at Casey and Brad, and they both went, oh. As much to say, what are you talking about? And afterwards, with every due respect, he's the head coach, and that's going to be what it is. But talking to both of them, he's going, that makes it more difficult for us. The ball's either going to, come over, or because they jump, we lose the flight of the ball over the head. So there's a goalkeeping opinion too, because this is the in to out version versus the out to in. You see what I'm saying? So we've got to be careful that we make sure that the goalkeeper is comfortable with how many in the wall. We overload walls, by the way, in most cases, unless you've got great players. And
Wait, are you saying you think that in general, as goalkeeper coaches, we overload walls?
Yes.
Okay.
And let me give the example of why I believe strongly in this. Is, let's say the ball is outside of the 18, midway between the semicircle and the corner of the 18, right? And let's say we put 4 in the wall, and we only need 3, right? Based on the distance and all of that, okay? So let's say it's a wall that I believe you've got 3. So now we add a 4th player. What does the goalkeeper have to do positionally in terms of their starting position?
They have to shift. They have to shift. They have to shift away from the. They have to shift away from the wall.
And where at the higher levels are they trying to execute?
Over the wall.
Okay, over the wall to that near post. So we just played into their hands. Tony Waders actually had this whole thing, and I liked it, was if the free kick, if a wall has to be set up outside of the box, do you really need, when we say a wall, or can you put 2 in, or whatever? Because if you start working out distances, so that's 28, 30 yards out. And if you're a competent goalkeeper from 30 yards, even with somebody, with a good shot, and you've got, 1 or 2 in the wall, you should be able to positionally be in a great starting position and so on. So I think there's a lot we can still research in organizing walls. Here's another thing on walls. Indirect, we have what we call a bullet man, right? That's the one that is the one that sacrifices their body, right, for the shot. In other words, they will line up. You've got your wall set. Now you've got your bullet person to one side, right? Now, if that bullet person, its starting position is too closer to the wall and makes a run towards the ball, what do they become in the wall? They become an extra person, because the vision of the goalkeeper
is obstructed, yeah.
Because of their approach. So I will always have them coming in from an angle, so that the goalkeeper can always see the ball if, the taker is going to be the one to get the strike in. They'll see the ball off the foot. Versus, in and then, we can't see it, and, the wall's now gone from a 4 to a 5 or a 3 to a 4. Yeah, so there's a lot of research still needs to be done
Yeah.
with that. Overload walls for sure. And every time we add a player into a wall, what else do we do that is a negative for the team?
Well, his numbers down.
There you go. So I'd rather have somebody marking an open player than an extra player in the wall that's pushed me further over one way, and now they're trying to execute. I just made life easier for them.
So I just want to let any player that I've played with in my career, collegiate, after college, men's league, whatever, if I got scored on because there was not enough people in the wall, I should have been able to handle that. That was on me, guys. No, honestly, I love what you just said though, because I was just thinking about from a standpoint of the shot and the numbers down, but I never thought about the fact that the goalkeeper's positioning had to shift, and because of that, the strategy, the tactics of the offense changes. That blew my mind right there. That's awesome.
And at the top level, you give a quarter of an inch, they'll take a mile. You know, the top players. It's what they want. So you're just playing right into their hands.
No, but I'm sure they, I mean, like Ederson or like, you know, anybody who plays against Man City, they have that on their scouting report. Like, look, let's maybe play some balls over the top. Let's see if we can bait him to come off his line and see if he makes a bad decision. And you never know. If he makes a bad decision, it doesn't lead to a goal, but his confidence is down the rest of the game. You're going to be pounding balls. How many times have you seen on the bench the coach say, you know, the goalkeeper's nervous, the goalkeeper's shaky right now. Serve. Let's see what he can do. So I don't know. There's so many little mind games that you can play.
I want to talk about this, by the way. So Yuta Nomura, who from New England Revolution, goalkeeper coach over there, has a question right here for you, Peter, in regards to we've been talking about obviously the goalkeeping program that you did with the U.S. Soccer. He asks, is there anything you should have done or that you could have done differently when you look back in the past, when you look back in regards to how you put the curriculum together and how you know how development has taken place today?
I think at the time we put the curriculum together, it was adequate for where the game was at, you know, because it's changed a lot since back in those days, as we know. That was only a start of what I envisaged as being an ongoing goalkeeping development program. As I said earlier, the idea of the goalkeeping license was to encourage just regular coaches to take it, to understand better the role of the goalkeeper and the breakdown of not just the techniques, but certainly the tactical role. Because, as I've said 2 or 3 times, a coach only sees it 90% of the time from out to in to the goalkeeper. It's very different when you stand in there and you look out and you watch a game evolve and all of that. I mean, we're looking at 2 different situations. So the idea was to educate as many coaches as we could. And just as a matter of interest, Scott Flood, who is the gentleman that I work with very, very close with the Federation, administratively and that, on all of our courses, great guy. He actually said that the feedback on the national goalkeeping coach was the best feedback of any licenses, including the A's and the B's, and that, in terms of what coaches got from it. In other words, new stuff that they really feel would benefit them. So going on from that, the idea then was, once we had got, you know, some water under the bridge, you know, we also put together, as you know, a relationship with the NSCAA, which the federations never really had, because of business, I guess. But we got that, where we got a lot of coaches through the goalkeeping level 1 and 2 for the NSCAA through the federation coaches. So we developed a whole string of goalkeeping coach instructors that work both for the NSCAA and the federation, and that's when we had everything cooking as far as goalkeeping was concerned. Then what happened was I was looking to then develop a goalkeeper instructor license, which would go to another level in terms of, the usual components. They don't change, but now even more detail, even more, the psychological. For the higher level, obviously, goalkeeper, I'm talking more, maybe senior, collegiate, but certainly professional. And the idea was to develop a lot of our, MLS goalkeeping coaches, when I say goalkeeping coaches, to really get into the goalkeeping and all learn from one another, but that never came to fruition, unfortunately. So, the interesting thing with the federation, and I mean this very respectfully because they gave me great opportunity to travel the world and be with teams and players and the whole bit. But I left the federation as the national goalkeeping coach in 2003 to go to Real Salt Lake. They never have officially appointed anybody officially into that position of U.S. Soccer National Goalkeeping Federation goalkeeping coach instructor. So we are behind in that respect. So maybe that answers somewhat the question. We need to get our act together goalkeeping wise, or they do.
Well, I mean, I think in regards to this, and I'll bring up somebody like Omar, who I respect highly as a young goalkeeper coach out there, is that it's kind of a lost generation of guys at, at Omar's age, late 20s, early 30s, where they never really got that. They never got that opportunity. Yes, United Soccer Coaches, they did have the program, and shout out, to the late great Tony DeChico. I took his advanced national license as well too, and their Lisa Cole and everything, all the work that they did. But the federation not being directly involved in goalkeeping development made people such as Omar have to fend for themselves in regards to, and it also negated the reasoning for a lot of people such as Omar, and I'm just using Omar as an example because he's right here, from pursuing their federation badges, because they said, well, if they don't care about goalkeeping, why should I care about getting their badges? And so it created this very discontent between the goalkeeping union and the federation. And I think, that they need to look into that. Now, shout out to Phil Wedden, and IGCC for providing opportunities for people to get that education. But it's something that I've been very passionate about in regards to. I felt very fortunate that I was one of the few that did get the license. I did want to go farther on, and I was disappointed that I was never able to get that next one. And shout out, by the way, to Scott Flood, because I actually got a what's it called when they let you bypass certain levels in order to get into the license? I don't know. So, yeah. I got a waiver. I got a waiver and to go into that goalkeeping license. So somebody out there thought I had some little bit of ability, and I appreciate Scott for helping that out. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been there before they canceled the program. So anyway, yeah, I don't know where that question was going. All I know it was just me venting for a second. All right, getting back to the topic right here, Peter. I want to ask you this because Omar and I, we actually kind of talked about this during our long conversation last night, was the demands. And I bring up the demands again from that conversation with Nathan Thackeray. And the demands at each phase of each age group changes. So should we be teaching tactics differently based on the demands of what is in front of them at the different levels?
Yeah, I mean, tactics, as a coach, you've got to, let's take the young ages, we'll bypass the 6 to 10s because we want them to have fun and let's look at the 11s to 14s. There should be obviously heavily technical training, but paying attention to every detail, as I said at the beginning, of their technical ability and breaking it down. And as a coach, not demanding it. let's talk about, I was saying it's the feet that get the hands to the ball. Well, suddenly somebody's serving a ball to me and the ball's not served right at me, it's coming here and they do this, right? Hey, not good enough. Stop. Back. Move your feet. It's the feet that get the hands to the ball most of the time, okay? First barrier, second barrier. So let's make sure every single time, even if the keepers are warming up, pre-session, and they're having a chit chat and this, that, and the other, and now suddenly, okay, guys, we're going to start in 2 minutes, so just elevate a little bit, and I see this, I'll stop, because it's not good enough. It has to be repetition of the correct technique with the details and everything, on diving. And we know occasionally you dive backwards, and it's a great save, and that because you saw it late or whatever. But when we're doing regular training in the repertoire, and it's putting the keeper down, I want to see everything as far as that dive, that you're attacking the ball, your hand position, how you're landing, depending on the different types of services in the set and what have you. But those details, and that's what, the kids will say at IMG, coach is so detail oriented. Absolutely, because only one breakdown of a detail and you're picking the ball out the back of the net. It's as simple as that. So, that's my philosophy really on that particular age.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I was just going to say, talk about I think I sent this rundown to you, I think about a week ago or so, and you said, all right, let's have a conversation to discuss the rundown. And I was like, man, this guy is detailed to the nth degree. And Omar was talking about it last night. He says he feels that you're doing yourself a disservice and you're doing the kids a disservice if you're not prepared for your session. I know a lot of people try to run it at a fly, and there's a difference between not being prepared for your session and having to adjust in the session. And I want goalkeeper coaches out there to hear that, because just because you're adjusting doesn't mean you weren't prepared. It just means that you've seen variables that you need to change in order to make it a more productive session, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, you should always be flexible, based on what you're seeing. And there's nothing wrong in that too. Sometimes depending on where you're at in your week, they've had school, they've done that. There's always a psychological component. And we're not talking about one, but, if you're working with a group of, 8 to 10, as we do sometimes, then you've got to, take a sort of a thermometer and feel where they're all at, okay? And sometimes the session that you've planned, you've got to adjust. And that's what good coaches do. They adjust based on the chemistry and what's going on at that particular moment. Just because you've written down, you've got to do this, 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 and this, hey. And sometimes it can go the other way. You'll get to where, wow, we're working on, dealing with crosses, and we've got a functional practice going and the whole bit. And it's like, well, keeper's done that great, along with the defensive unit. Let's now add another component, to make it more demanding and more realistic. So it's a matter of constant, feeling where you're at, and that comes with experience, I guess, too. In understanding, oh, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. No, you don't. Just play it by ear.
Yeah. Well,
Peter,
go ahead, Omar. I was
no, it was just I was talking to one of my friends, Eric Lanofsky, plays for T2, and he and I were discussing, like, would there ever become a point where goalkeepers are fully integrated into team sessions from the start, and there isn't any, like, there's going to be goalkeeper coaches, but like the goalkeeper coaches administering their coaching points and kind of connecting with the first team coach and saying, look, this session we want to work on through balls. Let's create a game model that we see for our goalkeepers to get reps in these different different scenarios. Do you ever feel like that's going to be something in the future where I would say maybe the game is going where we really integrate the goalkeepers maybe after 20 minutes and get them straight into sessions?
Yeah, I can see it coming. It's funny because I forget the name of a Dutch coach I was talking to. This is going back maybe 2 years ago, and he was all for that. It was a non-goalkeeping coach, though, and I disagree. And why I disagree is if we put them into that team environment, and we do it on a Friday at IMG, because obviously you're going to play Saturday, and the coach is going to go through, set plays, this, that, and the other, and that's fine. But every day, the goalkeeper needs specific attention to the details of their techniques before they integrate into the team practice. Okay, then obviously the goalkeeping coach, not trainer, but coach, should go with them and should be a part of it. We know that can't happen at youth level because of finance and the whole bit at this moment in time. So to see if we ever go that route, I think it would definitely be a negative. And let me tell you a little bit more why. Is goalkeepers, they've been brought up, that we're so-called a little different, whatever, because of our role and what we can do versus the rest of the team can't do, hands and so on. But at the end of the day, goalkeepers, when they have a good workout with you, and I'm talking generally now, and you say, okay, you're going to, coach wants you, you're integrating. Oh, can't we stay with you? We're going to be over there, we're going to be bored. Well, I try to explain, yeah, but you're going to go in now to a tactical role, okay?
Yeah.
The hard part for the goalkeeper, and this is, if ever what you're saying comes to fruition, where they start, is we have to teach the goalkeeper that even though they're not directly involved, once they integrate with the team, there's still a heck of a lot they should be doing and should be listening to and learning. I'll give you an example with goalkeepers recently at IMG. We had the federation, I think it was the B license or A license. So that they use our teams, for the coaches to put on their coaching sessions and so on. Most of our goalkeepers don't enjoy that session because, it's very stop and start, as you know, because the focus is the coach in getting their license and the whole bit. So it's a little different. But the goalkeepers say to me, oh, it's boring, it's this, it's that. And I'll go, let me help you, okay? Firstly, when coach stopped that practice, I watched you walk back to the second goalkeeper and start chit-chatting. Okay, I said, why didn't you sprint to the little huddle he'd called in the players and listen to what he was saying? It's going to develop your understanding of the game, not just goalkeeping, but how you relate to it as a goalkeeper. So don't waste those opportunities. Go listen. It may not directly involve you. You may not be flying through the air to make a save, but tactically, you're starting to learn a little bit more about what the coach wants and what they see as breakdowns. So you understand where that goes. So, again, going back to your question, if it ever goes that way, there would be a real change in the role of the goalkeeper coach, which, has to be an assistant coach.
Well, guys, we've been going for I mean, my God, Peter, we could go all day. I mean, and I really appreciate you taking honestly all this time with us. I think we can go over an hour and a half, which is just, I mean,
Good.
we're gonna put this with the Matt Brown episode. So this might be a 3-hour podcast tomorrow that's going to be released out to the world. But I mean, just such a wealth of information that you're giving to everybody. If before we go, Omar, do you have any more questions for Peter or Peter? Do you have any advice for any young goalkeeper coaches out there who are having trouble teaching tactics?
Yeah, be a student of the game. There is an abundance of games that you can watch. As as a goalkeeping coach, when you go to the stadium to watch a game, whether it be college game, youth game, whatever, make sure you get in a good seat and don't just watch the event. Watch the goalkeeper's role, one of them, what they are or aren't doing based on what you believe in. And that's where, now you can say, well, if I was going to put a lesson plan together for tomorrow's session for this keeper, he doesn't play or she doesn't play high enough or this, that, you can go anywhere with it. But all too often, we watch as the game as an event instead of let's focus on what we really care about, which is the goalkeeper's tactical, positioning, everything. The play's down the other end, but where is the goalkeeper? What have they communicated, organized for transition? You can listen, depending on where you're at the game and that. There's so much you can get by being a student of goalkeeping, and obviously the team.
Yeah. Omar, anything you want to add?
No, I think honestly, I've learned a lot in this conversation, and just so far the last 7-8 weeks of just everyone sharing ideas. And that's one thing that I'm imploring, and I'm really hoping that everybody takes it into account now of let's share ideas, because we're all going to learn something off each other. And even this conversation like this, I learned so much about just kind of just the I don't know, for me, the tactical side of things, to train it has been difficult because I'm very much in the American style of technique. So understanding that there's different ways to go about it, not just the way I know how to do it, and just hearing different ways has sparked so many ideas in my head. And I mean, I can't wait to get back on the field and just try some of this stuff out. So hopefully, coaches, I know we were all kind of forced into sharing, and you really had no choice. But hopefully, when you have that choice now, when things get back to normal, the choice is actually to share and help the younger goalkeeper coaches like myself out there who, I've benefited so much already.
Honestly,
I'm still green and growing. I'm not ripe and rotten. So that's, even at my age, I can still learn. And lastly, it is a game of opinions. And just because Peter Mellor says this, you have every right to prove me wrong too. And
For sure, yeah.
That's what is healthy in the game. We listen to each one of us, and at the end of the day, we decide what's best for us. We take a bit from this coach and a bit from that coach, and we put it with what we are about. But at the end of the day, that's what's important, what we're about. And
For sure.
It's been great. Thank you.
Yeah. And before we go, I had this question that I put in there, and literally I feel like this whole conversation kind of led that direction of what the answer is already in regards to, is a goalkeeper that can understand how to defend the different areas of the field more instrumental than a goalkeeper who's technically superior? And it seems to, bottom line, come down to your opinion of goalkeeping, and everyone's going to have a different opinion on what's important in goalkeeping. All right, guys, that's all the time. I've got to get lunch. I'm starving. I have not eaten. My back is killing me right now. I have to run a training session virtually, guys. Okay, I'm staying safe. I'm staying home in a few minutes right here. Peter, if anybody out there, if there's a goalkeeper coach, honestly, the fact that you're so accessible, with the knowledge that you have, it just means so much to us in the goalkeeping community. Where's the best place for people to reach out to you?
I'm more than happy, to share my email address, which is PME112047 @AOL.com. So
See-
you know when to send me a birthday card.
See now, the thing is, you're more than happy to share your email address because no one's going to remember that without having to listen to it a couple times over. That's awesome. And guys, obviously you can reach out to Omar Zini at ProGK Academy _, especially on Instagram. Contact at Inside the 18. That's the number 18media.com if you have a guest suggestion or a topic suggestion. This has honestly been one of my favorites in a long, long time. Even though anybody who's listening who's been on the show, every one of them is my favorite. So I shouldn't have said that. We'll have to edit that one out. All right, guys, that's all the time on Inside the 18, and we are out. Later, guys.
Yeah, later.
Hey, guys.
Thanks, Matt.
Peter, thank you so much for this. It's been fantastic. So the podcast goes out tomorrow. I'll edit this live stream, and that'll be up in a few minutes.
Okay, sounds great. I appreciate the opportunity, buddy. We'll stay in touch, yeah?
Definitely.
Pleasure.
Have a good one.
All right,
man.
Peter. Take care.
All right.
Pleasure meeting you.
All the best. Good luck.
Likewise.
Thanks.
Take care,
Bye.
guys. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.